votes. It didn't come close to passing with 140 votes. But in years past, it only did 2 or 3 votes. Ron Paul and maybe a couple of other great House members. But 140, it was disturbed by that because that could translate to the House not voting to fund the war in the next budget. They can set up a rule where you got to have 60% to pass the Senate. It may not be able to get past the Senate if the public demand for peace is so strong that it'd be politically risky to support the war.
So even these high and mighty ivory tower types are very sensitive if the people and their representatives in Congress reach a certain threshold to cut war funding. So they're not totally indifferent to the pulse of the public. They're very watchful of these things. And then, of course, they're going to try and counteract them, I would think.
Well, they want to keep wars going. It was...
so there's no reason to believe that...
Before Clinton took us back to where Bill Burr said the United States has got to get over the Vietnam syndrome, as they call it. The first war we ever lost. In Korea, another unfortunate war, but the ceasefire was actually north of the 38th parallel, which had been the dividing line before.
Correct.
Not much territory, but significantly they didn't yield any territory. In Vietnam, South Vietnam fell. The people there were brutally treated. Many of them fled to this country. Many of them fell off helicopters there, hanging on to trying to get aboard an American ship as we pulled out of the war.
I see.
But it was absolute loss. So we had the Vietnam syndrome. So the United States isn't going to go to war. It's hard to get a nice war going.
So, in terms of Libya, though, is there any reason to believe they'll put the fires out there and discontinue that war just to keep the natives, the American people, from getting too restless? Or do you think they'll arrogantly just keep that war going?
They'll arrogantly try to keep it going.
Very unfortunate. It's such a drain on our blood and treasure, and the disfigurement of our young men and women, and the deflated deaths where they say the killed or the war dead is 6,000 or 7,000 when that only is killed in action, and the actual war dead is those that die later of illnesses and disease. And so the real war dead is the tens of thousands from Afghanistan and Iraq alone, not 6,000. Yes. This is one of the great myths out there. I'll make that quick comment. At any rate, Jim, do you think Bilderberg, with all the press coverage that's growing so much in Europe, American Free Press holding the line every year, of course, American media waking up a little bit, do you think they'll keep meeting the way they are, or do you think they'll stop having Bilderberg meetings or modify them a lot? Are they going to keep doing the same old thing as the publicity grows?
And they'll keep trying to find ways to hide the meeting place. There's some discussion about, in the future perhaps, have the meeting at a private home. Of course, there's a lot of castles that are private homes, and not go there all at once, just trickle in, so it doesn't look out of the ordinary. No police escorts. This year they took the blue decal off these cars that they always had before. So the guard can just wait on it. He's got a blue decal that says BB in the lower right hand. The windshield's been that way for years and years.
But not this year?
Not this year.
What do you make of that, real briefly?
That they're trying to disguise the fact that Bilderberg's building.
Oh, I see. No BB, just so they can keep everything real innocuous looking.
Yes.
So I would wonder real quickly why they didn't meet at like Pocantico Hills, the Rockefeller estate along the Hudson River, or Cyrus Eaton's old estate, I think it's up in Canada. Why didn't they do that years ago? Why did they go to hotels? I mean, I've heard some say it's just, part of it is ego-driven. They like to flaunt that they can do this, and we can't do anything about it, end quote. And they can still have secret deliberations, even though it's not totally secret that they're actually getting together. Is it an ego thing? Is it an arrogance thing? Why didn't they go to private estates decades ago?
They're full of arrogance and ego, and some of them are not too bright anyway.
The pseudo-sophistication.
Yes.
So well-educated, they're stupid.
There's such a thing as an educated fool.
Correct. Interesting, yeah. But now you're saying that they might actually
it's being discussed.
say, ding, 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 why don't we go to a private estate? Hey, why didn't we think of that 40 years ago?
But they
you know?
also will be careful if people don't say, hey, look at all those cars going into the Rockefeller house. What's going on? All those cars going in. That's why they do sort of a trickle thing, more of a trickle. Maybe if a helicopter lands maybe on his private heliport, typical 3 times a day, well, 3 helicopter landings will bring in about 45 of them.
And a typical Bilderberg meeting is around 130 to 150
Yeah.
people, right? Including royalty, heads of state, media moguls, corporate titans, NATO officials. And as we wind up this interview, it's interesting that the Swiss National Council member that I mentioned earlier, Dominique Beitig of the Swiss People's Party, also pointed out that since NATO officials are part of Bilderberg, and since NATO has been killing scores of people in Afghanistan, and especially in the Libyan operation that you say Bilderberg will extend, he thought, therefore, that the nations or terrorists or radicals who are the victims of NATO operations might actually enact reprisals against Switzerland for hosting Bilderberg. But it's interesting that the Swiss officials just brushed that off, saying, oh, no, we can allow them to meet here, no problem.
Years ago, we were able to report that NATO had become the United Nations Standing Army.
Correct. And that's by design.
Yes. Well, it also is a step toward world government. When you have your own army. The first time NATO fired a shot in anger was to invade. What the heck was that little country? Was to invade a country. They were under their charter supposed to be defense only
against the Soviet menace, the Western Alliance.
The Soviet Union was going to attack Western Europe. There'd be NATO to resist, while the United States got troops over here quickly, strictly defensive under its own charter. But now, without amending the charter, they simply announced that in the future, NATO will operate only at the direction of the United Nations, and the United Nations will decide where and when and who NATO fights. We didn't see any great resistance to it. Our own country, which supplies and bankrolls the giant share of NATO.
And many Bilderberg is affiliated with the UN and NATO, as noted.
American soldiers wearing blue NATO helmets, taking orders from some foreign officer, has to be translated into English.
Completely unconstitutional.
Yes, for Americans to serve under any flag but Old Glory. And I think a lot of countries probably have that in their constitution, or at least very much in their policy, that the only fighting we do is under our own flag, not the flag of the world government.
Well put, Jim. So, Bilderberg, all the exposure, are they weakening? A lot of them are the older members, the octogenarian tyrants, Henry Kissinger, David Rockefeller. They're not long for this world. Do you see their demise in any way weakening Bilderberg as they pass on to the great?
Well, they always pass the torch. The Rothschilds pass the torch down.
The younger Rothschilds.
Yes. Well, for years, there's always a guy named Rothschild will succeed a guy named Rothschild at Bilderberg. In fact, when I first started chasing Bilderberg, I thought Evelyn Rothschild was a female, but he's male, of course.
Yeah, I was surprised to find that too. A guy named Evelyn, you know. But I've heard you say in other venues that you do believe they're weakening, maybe losing their grip a little due to all the exposure.
Oh yes.
Are the lights getting too bright for them?
Yes. Well said.
And at the very least, even they are having to be somewhat tacitly open, right? They're starting to put out name lists and watered down press releases, at least acknowledging the public to a point, right?
Well, over the years,
if only for window dressing.
Over the years, they've done that when enough newspapers would demand it, especially larger newspapers, because they don't. The Irish Times will take another bite out of their butts. They don't. The Guardian will take another bite out of their butts.
Oh, so they figure that'll
at least calm them down a little bit. It'll be a little bit less harsh. Because if we don't give them a list, there'll be big stories and strong editorials about the big secret. Why?
Yeah, where's the list? Where's the press release? Where's the press conference? Do you see Bilderberg having an official press release and or press conference, any kind of formal announcements this year? Or so far, are you seeing just hush-hush?
I don't think they will. They tried it once many years ago.
A press conference?
After the Bilderberg meeting. They didn't like the questions, especially mine. And they didn't like the press coverage, so they said never again.
So the press conference didn't go very well.
Not by their standards, by my standards, went very well.
Interesting. Well, we've been talking with Jim Tucker, the lead Bilderberg hound in the world, really. And I'm his apprentice, Mark Anderson of American Free Press, for which we both work. And we've been discussing Bilderberg 2011 as well as its history and future prospects. Any parting words, Jim?
Yes, I've got to get to the bank and get some money.
Yes, anyway, thanks for listening out there at AmericanFreePress.net and viewers of other programs that may carry this interview. And we'll see you next time online and in the newspaper, American Free Press. Thank you.